Basically, to start off the class, one of the main things with this class is a buyer consultation and how you find your buyers and setting your appointments with them. So we don't have any actual just buyers agents in here, do we? Anybody does both? Yeah, okay. We all know, as far as the class yesterday, in setting up your appointments, that's always good to make your calls and try to track your people and make 10 contacts a day. Got a little guide in here that teaches you, kind of shows you a chart, so how you make your referrals, how you make your connections, how you got your appointments, sending out your cards on a daily basis. That's part of your lead generation time, whether it be working with leads on buyers. With my buyers, the way I work for picking up the buyers is typically going through past clients. You've got your sphere of influence of people that you have, and as you get to that point, then you build up your referral base and keeping in contact with those people that you've sold the house to before. That's always a good contact with them, and then just seeing where they're at as far as bringing on new buyers. Lead generation, blocking your time and doing your lead generation is a big part of that. One thing that and I know we're all guilty of this, is somebody calls on the phone, calls off of one of your leads, and a sign that you've got out or something, and they want to see a house. So we jump in our car and run, and we show them a house. And we forget to ask a few good questions. And I know we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. I've done it in the past, and I'm trying to get better at it. And I really had a good example for this class. I ran into that situation just yesterday. Sitting in front of that house or looking on the internet and says, I want to see this house. I want to see this house right now. Don't know who this person is. Kind of question them out, because when it comes through on your cell phone, definitely you can tell the phone numbers. I have a long distance number out of Florida. So it's somebody either here in town, finding out if they're here locally, if they're working with an agent. That's one big question to ask them right off the bat. Are you working with an agent? If it's your listing, there's no sense in running out to show them a house if they're already working with another agent. If they are, then they need to contact that agent, and that agent needs to set an appointment. You could say that in a very nice way without wasting your time of jumping and running when they're already working with another agent. I think that's a huge part that we've all found ourselves guilty of. You get all the way out there, you show them the house, you start giving them your pitch and find out that they've already working with another agent. They're just driving around on their own, and maybe they've given them materials to go and drive, and they want more information because they came across your listing on the way and wanted to see it. And then from there, trying to get them into the office. If they're not working with an agent, a good example is like yesterday in the situation that I ran into. I said, the house is occupied. I would have to call the seller and set up an appointment. Would you like to set an appointment to view the home? And I put it off till the next day. So putting it off to the next day, one, gives your sellers a little bit of time and leeway. You don't just want to jump and show the house. I know we run into that situation a lot right now where they're vacant homes. But really trying to drag them into the office, find out what they're looking for. That was one of the questions I asked. Are you working with an agent? The next question is, are you here in town? Are you looking for a particular home? And would you like to come into the office and set an appointment? And we can go through and review some of the things that you're looking for in a home. And then we can put together and compile a list of homes and set some time to go out and look at it. In my opinion, that's a serious buyer. If they want to take the time to come into the office and sit down with you and go through what they're looking for, that's a serious buyer, and you want to try to bring them into that appointment. Sometimes you can't always bring them in. They're a little hesitant. But if you can set up a showing to show them maybe one or two houses, have your buyer's packet ready, and while you're on the spot with them, because like I say, we come across the foreclosure homes, it's always nice to have that buyer's packet ready to go and have one with you, and you can share some of the information with them at that time. This class goes over kind of a guide of during the buyer's consultation and what you can go through and ask people questions. And you'll notice in the buyer's packet that I have made up, I have a little form that kind of helps me as a guide to go through and ask them some of the questions and what they're looking for in a need analysis for the home. And then the other thing is, we're all salespeople. We talk, we don't listen. Listening is a huge part of that. Listen to what their needs are. Ask them questions back to get more information about what they're looking for. You know, it's not only the size of the home, it's the location, what's involved with the home. Do they have children? Is school districts important? Where are their jobs? Relative to where they're working would tell you a lot about the location and what they're looking for. Are they retired? Then maybe they're looking for a lake home. Maybe they want to be closer to the doctors and the hospitals in town. I mean, we all know that we have a lot of out-of-town buyers in the area. They pick up a parade of homes or a Discover magazine, and next thing you know, they're seeing something that's a lot less than what you're pointing out to them because they're in Golden, you know. They don't know where Golden is. If they are lake people, and what I have done too with that is sometimes when you bring them in for that consultation and that initial visit and they're not familiar with the area, the Kimberly City Lake Chamber of Commerce has a lake area map. I have one of those and I have it laminated. And I can lay that out and show them how Table Rock Lake spans out, the fingers of the lake. So then they try to really, that helps them really put it in perspective of relation to being close to Branson and where they're wanting to be after you know their activities and such as that. So just diving in, finding a little bit about the people, and you know, that's the first thing to do is kind of fill out the buyer information sheet and going from there. Be sure that you're taking notes on all of that, and that's why I use that guide. It helps me down the road. It's just a little guide to get their information from them. Does anybody have any questions so far on different things that they use or anything like that? No? Okay. There's several sheets in here to just go through kind of what you might do is pair up with someone else and kind of ask some of those questions and make them into your own until it becomes part of your, it's just an automatic thing when you start asking people after you've done some preliminary asking questions and such. And of course, you know, getting down to their must-haves and educating them on the market and what they're not going to be able to find everything, you know, their must-haves and want-to-haves. Then the next step is to share your value proposition with them. Your value proposition with them is letting them know what services you offer for them. I know we're all guilty of this as well. You know, they say get a buyer's agency agreement signed. A buyer's agency agreement is a great thing to have signed, but let's face it, if I just met you and we're going to take you out and show you properties, I'm not so sure that I want to sign something right off the bat. But I think the biggest thing to that and the most important thing to that is to educate them on what a buyer's agency agreement is. I start that off with going over a Missouri broker's disclosure. We have to have it signed. We have to have a Missouri broker's disclosure form in our files. So if you start with the Missouri broker's disclosure form and explain to them how it works in the state of Missouri, how we work as an office, then the next step after the Missouri broker's disclosure, it will walk you right into a buyer's agency agreement and being able to explain it to them. I keep a blank one in my buyer's packet. That way I've gone over the broker's disclosure with them, then I go over the buyer's agency agreement. And I explain it as an employment contract. And that's basically what it is. They're hiring you for the services. And I think on the buyer's side, one thing that's really important to educate them is the fact that there's no fee to them on the buyer's side. The seller's the one that's paying your commission. And once they understand that, they tend to be a little more loyal to you They understand that basically you're out showing them houses, you're driving them around, you're doing all this groundwork to put things together, and you don't get paid unless you make a sale. Now, after they've spent a little time with you looking at houses, the first time out and spent time with you, they feel that loyalty. They don't want to, bring that back up to you, and it stops them from just driving around and calling off of a sign. And if you explain the broker's disclosure form well and your buyer's agency agreement well, they get it. They understand that. They understand that the seller, that sign in the yard is, that agent represents that seller. That's their first obligation, is to that seller. And if you explain that well to them, then you tend to have more loyalty with your buyers. And I usually ask them after the first time out, I tell them, if you don't like me, you can fire me. It's not a problem. I want you to be happy with what you're getting. So on the second time out is usually when I'm asking them to go ahead, and I bring it up at the end. I'd ask them to sign that buyer's agency agreement. So I give them a little bit of me first and decide if they want to still continue to work with me, and then bring up the buyer's agency agreement again. Usually have no problem getting it signed at that point because they understand it, they get it then. Okay? How many are getting buyer's agency agreements signed?
Half and half.
Half and half? Well, that's good.
But we talked about this in a CE class I took, and one of the things that the lady mentioned is, she said that, and I use this now, she said, technically speaking, by Missouri law, all agents are seller's agents, unless they have a buyer's agency agreement, and that allows you to represent the buyer. By definition, we're all seller's agents. And so using that to say, this is what allows me to legally be on your side, helps.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think another big thing to that is dual agency. So you explain a buyer's agency agreement to them, and then next thing you know, you're showing them one of your properties on the signs in the yard, and they go, oh, well, you represent that seller already. Well, remember we talked about the dual agency and what the confidentiality is there and what we can and can't do. The majority of the time we're not selling our own listings, but they're not as fearful of that if they're educated on that and understand where they stand with that. So, anybody else? Let's ask questions. Okay, so educating them on yourself and what services you offer for them. That's one reason why in that buyer's packet, I also put in testimonials. I keep, when I have a buyer, and I do a 2-week follow-up on the buyers, calling them, hey, how's everything going with the house? Do you need anything? Did you get moved in? Just touch a base with them again. I think the last time they see you is at the closing table at the title company, and they see the girls at the title company hand you a check, and they don't see you anymore. And that makes it an easy process to go back in and get those referrals and keep in touch with those people. They all know people. They have family, they have friends, they have coworkers. Everybody at one time or another is going to need to sell a house, buy a house, have a friend that does, what have you. And that really helps to build up your referral base of staying in touch with those past clients. I think that's the hardest thing, is because we get so busy with going on to the next deal and not staying in touch with our past clients. And the past clients are your bread and butter. In any sales job, we all know that. It's a lot easier to work off of referrals than cold calling and putting door knockers out and walking neighborhoods and things like that. So it takes time. If you're new, it takes time to build that up. And you have to work off of that sphere and work it really hard to get to that point to build up your referral base. But remember, while you're building that up, is to stay in touch with those past clients. Those are huge, huge importance too. You can find some of this material On the EX site, it tells you where it's at in the training packet. The showing process. How many times do you have buyers that they come in and they've got, everybody's on the internet anymore and looking, and they come in and they've got a list of like 20 houses they want to see. One of those processes is when you're finding and asking facts and questions. I always try to narrow down their searches, and if there's things I still want to see, if you can explain to them, yes, I've been in this house, and that's part of that process of educating yourself on the market. If you're not familiar with what's out there in the market, go out and just preview homes. Preview a few homes every week, so you get to know what's out there on the market. And that way you can tell them right off the bat. But what I've found in the past is, I see people, they'll print out 30 listings and hand it to a buyer. Man, that's a little overwhelming to them. They expect your knowledge for you to be able to help them and narrow down that search. And the other thing is when you're taking them out and showing them property, I usually limit it to 5 or 6 a day. I won't show them more than 5 or 6 properties in a day. If you show them more than that, it just gets all boggled in their head. They can't remember what house is this.
And then they get discouraged and they say, we'll wait.
Yeah, they get very confused on things.
Yeah.
That information on the buyer's packet is my information that's right off the bat, but when we get ready to go out and look at homes, I have the customer display, and only the customer display. I don't put seller's disclosures and plat maps and all of that into the buyer's packet in their hands with them. I have them slide those right into their buyer's packet, and I give them an ink pen, and I say, okay, here you go. Which one wants to make notes on it? They carry that with them when we go from house to house. They're making notes on it. Do whatever helps you remember what that house is. I've had them called the pink flamingo house, the cat house, or the purple room, or whatever that will help them remember what that house is. And they actually get back in the car and they will start making notes. They'll make notes on that about the house, or they'll do it right in the house and carry their packets in. And I tell them when we step into the house that I start going through as they're looking in the house. I let them know the days on the market, go over the square footage, things like that, to them while they're looking. I've got my agent copy, and I'm just running through some of those items with them while we're looking through the house. I've also had people tell me that they've had agents in the past that open the door and just stand there. They don't walk through the house with them. They don't open the closet doors. They don't open the crawl space door. They're not going to get in there and look with them. And I tell you, if somebody wants to look in the crawl space, I'm looking in the crawl space too. It doesn't matter. I want to see that house as well. And they feel like that you're really concerned, you care for what they're buying because you want to see what's in and out of it as well. Once they take that list at the end of showing them the houses, I always ask them when we're driving back to the office or at the last house of meeting there, I ask them to take what we've looked at today and put a top 3 list together. And once it's always funny because you get a silent moment because which one's going to answer because his may be different from hers. But that's always good. Then you find out there's things that are important to her, important to him, and how you can compile that together. And that helps you for the next time out when you're showing property, is taking those top 3 and putting them together, and whether they want to keep those on the list, and maybe the next time you go and you're looking at more houses, you might keep that top 2 or 3 on the list and say, did you want to go back and preview this one as well? Did you want to look at that one again? Because when you only see 5 or 6 houses, you go out again, and you've only seen that house one time, maybe you need to go look again. Everybody sees something different the second time around. And you know whether to keep it on the list or rule it out. So I think that's important to ask those questions. Again, you're asking the questions and then listening to them and what they're looking for. as far as, in the house and the area, and then you find out some of their concerns, and maybe you decide you need to tweak it up a little bit. So,
One thing that's always kind of helped me is that if a buyer keeps talking about a particular house or really likes a house and you're trying to drag them over the closing line, I mean, we're all licensed salespeople, but and that doesn't mean to me that we're all real estate wait for the buyer to buy people or real estate wait for somebody else to sell your listing people. We are salespeople, and a lot of times I think your buyer needs help buying a home, and if they really want it and they're just, hem-hawing a little bit, I always take them back to the house, because how can they make a decision about whether or not they want the house unless they're in the house?
that's right.
Plus, that usually does some emotional things to them to make them say,
It's been the ether.
hey, you know what, let's go ahead and write up an offer. I've had more luck writing offers actually in the house than back at the office.
Mhm.
Anyway.
That's very true. I think that's a huge point, Jeremy. And I'm going to back up a little bit because I forgot one very important thing when you're doing that initial consultation in the office with them. Pre-approval.
Oh, yeah.
Are they working with a lender? Find out who they're working with, what lender they're working with. If they're not, give them a list of 3 of your top lenders that you work with and say, look, I deal with these lenders every day. They're great people. Won't take but a few minutes. You can actually get on the phone, if you've got them in the office, you can get on the phone and call a lender. Set an appointment. Sometimes those lenders will come to you. They'll be welcome to come down to your office and meet them right there, or you can take them out to the office or show them. They appreciate that, you take them and holding their hand to get that. But if you don't have a pre-approval, you're really wasting your time. A lot of people think that instantly they're going to be pre-approved, but a lot of it is they're scared. They don't understand. Around here we do a lot of USDA loans, first-time home buyers. They don't know the process, and they welcome you to take them to a lender that's going to hold their hand and kind of guide them through some of that. But it's also important that you take a few lenders from the area, whoever you're comfortable with and use, and get to know those lenders well. Understand their products. You're not the lender, but you need to know the process and what their guidelines are on a USDA loan, an FHA loan, different types of conventional loans, what you can do on a condo. That's important, because if you can talk knowledgeable to them to throw that information out, then they have a lot more confidence in you. Don't go into the whole lending process and what the rates are and everything, that you'll have to refer to the lender, but I can educate you this, and this. And another thing they have to understand is when you're going in and asking for closing costs, we do a lot of the USDAs around here, and regardless of that, we're always asking for closing costs, seller to pay closing costs. If you know the lenders that you work with, you pretty much know what those closing costs are. You have that in your head, you already know. And they need to be educated on those things to realize what processes there are. So I wouldn't even put them in the car and take them out to see a house if they're not pre-approved. I mean, you might end up in a situation where you have to kind of drag them to a lender. You have to keep pumping that into them. But once they're pre-approved, we can go from there. And I found the best way to do that is put it back on them. Well, I don't want to upset you, because if we go out here and we look at a $200,000 house and you're only approved for $130,000, then your sights and expectations are set so much higher, and then you don't qualify, and it's going to be really hard to find something that matches that. So for me to do a good job for you, you need to get pre-qualified with a lender so that we know which houses to start at and take you to. That's my best way of putting it to them. That's the way I like to share it with them. Then you want to go over and negotiating the offer. You want to go over everything, and that's the other thing where you need to be up with your lenders and knowing how to explain to them. They see it as they want to come in and they want to make an offer for $20,000 less than list price, or $10,000 or whatever. We get some ridiculous ones out there these days, but remember, it's their offer and you have to submit any and all offers. However, if you educate them through the process, you've pulled the comparables and you know the market, then you can tell them what you think is a good offer on the property. But what I've also found is when you're going back and asking for the seller to pay closing costs, they constantly forget. If you're looking at $3,000, $4,000 in closing costs, remember, that's what the seller's looking at is that $3,000 less on the offer. So if you're already going in at $7,000 less, and then you're asking for $3,000 closing costs, not that I'm working for the seller, but you have to understand that that seller is looking at that as $10,000 less. So educate them on that before they come in with too low of an offer that you can't get the sellers to respond with it. If you can throw the comps out and show the comps on what's sold in the area, then that's what they're relying on you to make the educated price for them and to make the offer on. They're going to throw something out with the market that we're in right now. They like to just throw something out low and say, we'll see where they're at. If it's not within reason, you're wasting your time and theirs too. It's, why spend a lot of time trying to get that done if they're not even going to respond to you on a counter offer? Try to keep them in the range where they understand where the counter offer is going to be.
Got a question right there. I've had some people say that if your buyer wants to make an offer and you think it's pretty low, but they still want to make that offer, to do it verbally first to see whether or not it's worth putting on paper. I can see two sides of that. I see that point, but I also kind of wonder if that's not admitting to the seller's agent right off the bat, we know this is so incredibly low that we're not going to bother putting it on paper. What's your experience with that?
I don't like to do verbal offers at all.
Okay.
If they want you, well, just throw that out to them and see what they say. Well, a seller's not going to take you serious unless you're putting it in writing. And that's my comeback to them. I think your buyer is serious if they're willing to put it in writing and you have some type of negotiations still yet if it's in writing. It's worth taking the time to put it in writing. It doesn't take that long to type up a contract and put it in writing. Nobody takes you serious. And besides that, you're protecting yourself. Because you find that people say, well, I asked this agent to throw this offer out. I don't know if they ever did or not. Well, if they came in and signed it, then you're going to get a response on it, then you're going to know if they did. So that's one of those things that what I would call just cover yourself. You don't want people out there saying that you didn't do that. I think that's huge. Setting expectations for service and the service that you give the client, that's of course up front in the buyer's consultation when you're talking to them and telling them what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. But it's also after you work through the negotiations and you get the offer accepted, then keeping in touch with the buyer through the process, letting them know what's going on. Explain the process to them. The lender, now you're going to have to go in and get documents signed by the lender and meet with the lender. Keep in touch with that lender. Know what's going on when the lender gets to the different stages of processing the loan for them. Inspections. And I probably should have thrown this in too. I have a list of inspectors. It's your list of inspectors, your list of lenders, all of those things. You shouldn't just throw out one and say, well, I'll use this one. I think they say you should throw out at least 3 and give them the option to choose from that. And I think that's very important. And our process of going through with inspections also is letting the buyer set up the inspection themselves, or if they authorize you to set up the inspection for them after they choose it. A lot of times they're working during the day and they have unique schedules. I will ask them if they prefer for me to set it up for them and what days and times would be better. I highly encourage all buyers to be at the inspection And I know this is probably a big debate, but I am at every inspection, every home inspection, with my buyer, holding their hand through it. I think you're missing the boat if you're not. You're not there to say anything, or you're just holding their hand. You're there for them. And the difference with that comes to the point of, once that inspector does the inspection and goes over everything with that buyer, the buyer is in the house, they've been with the inspector, they've seen what they're talking about. They know whether it's a major issue or not to be concerned with. And guess what? You do too. You know how to respond to that inspection notice back to that seller if you know what they're talking about. If you haven't been there and seen it, how do you know? You don't know how to respond. You don't know how to hold their hand and educate them, whether that's a major deal or if it's a minor deal. Well, you remember the inspector said this. But if that's a major concern to you, I would call the inspector, ask him to explain that to you further. Now, a lot of times we have out-of-town buyers, they're not able to be here for the inspection. They've gone back home. I'm still there for the inspection. I still go, I meet the inspector over there. I may not be there for the whole inspection, but I'll be there towards the last 30 minutes of it and run through it with the inspector. And when he sends that report out to the buyer and sends you a copy of it, you know what they're talking about a little more. But again, always refer them back to the inspector. If there's something in question or in doubt, refer them back to the inspector and let the inspector be the one that answers their concerns of whether they need to follow up further on it. But I think that buyers feel that you're not doing your process and carrying them through with that if you're not there for the inspection. And the other thing is, I think I hear a lot of inspections and deals fall apart from not being there at an inspection. And then it's the inspector's fault. Well, if you weren't there, then it's partially your fault because you didn't really know how to educate that buyer and overcome their concerns. But when we're going through that, setting up the inspection, I'm always sure to remind the buyer that this is not for cosmetic issues. It's for structural and safety issues. That's your biggest concern. If you help educate them that and remind them again when you get to the house for the inspection and they see that cracked tile in the floor. Okay, there's one cracked tile, that's cosmetic. It's not a structural issue. It's not a safety issue. And I usually, once I leave the inspection, we've kind of hit on the items that we think that we're going to approach on the inspection when we get the report back. And you've just made that whole process a lot easier instead of sitting down and going through a 30, 40-page inspection with them and going, well, I really don't know what he's talking about here. You will know as well as they know, and remembering what they said. I think that's part of customer service too. The other thing is also having a list of all the utility companies in the area, knowing the utilities for the house that you're selling. As you're going through that process, you've been through the inspection, appraisal's been ordered. I don't always meet appraisers there. That's not that really necessary. Appraisers are going to do their job, whether we like them or not. They don't really care if you're there. And they really don't like your buyers there when they're doing their appraisal either. But you're stepping them through that. Okay, we've made it through the inspection. Okay, we have the appraisal in. Okay, it's being submitted to underwriting. And even though that lender's staying in touch with them, it's good for you to touch base with them too. Either touch them with an email, a text message, a phone call. Just give them updates along the way. And then when you're narrowing it down to the closing side of it, give them a list of all the utilities. Okay, here's the next step. You're going to need to contact the utility companies to get the utilities switched over. Have all of that readily available to hand out to that buyer. And that way they can have those things done ahead of time instead of after the fact. It's always nice that they have that set up, and that's just another process of helping the buyer to the end. Some of this in the back of the material goes over the e-transaction, and I don't know, is everybody familiar with that? And where we're going through the dot loop and everything and having where you can electronically sign contracts, and everything's gonna be paperless. We are working on that process. I'm not going to educate you on that. I'm not a techie person. But I know that that's in the works, and some Keller Williams offices are already operating that way, and systems are being put in place in our office and working through to do that. So hopefully, as to what Jeremy said, I don't know, some people may be using DocuSign now, and I've never really done a lot of DocuSign just for the simple fact that I know that we're changing over to this system. Your buyers you have them in the ether, you have them at the house. You got an iPad, do it right there. Do the contract right in the house. If you don't have an iPad, you can't. I always have it in my briefcase. I've always got a contract. I can handwrite a contract, that's not a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Be ready to go. You never know. You may lose them if they want to think about it until the next day while you're writing it up. You could take them back to the office if you want to and feed them some coffee or send them out to dinner and write it up, but let them know that you're expecting them back within the hour and you'll have everything written up and ready for them to sign too. So, I'm sure that, I know Jen is working on some of that information on the online where we'll be able to do the DocuSign and such as that. So I'm sure there'll be more classes coming once that becomes available. There's a lot of information with our forms that have to be input into the system first, and they constantly keep changing, as we all know they changed it the first of the year. So, not sure if I covered everything. I went through that kind of quick, but any questions? Anybody got any questions? That's all I know.
Thanks, Kim.
Healthy employee.
Very good, Kim, thank you.